new World War III update here. Yes, I know the lighting's bad. For a guy who does photography, and I know the lighting's bad, and I know I should have the camera on the other side, but for some reason I don't do that. I don't know, is it that just being mean or something? I don't know. I'm hoping you guys are liking the new restructuring of how I'm doing the World War IIIs now. You know, a little more frequently. Because I know some of you guys are doom porn junkies and stuff like that, but I hope it is informing you and stuff like that. So I hope it's working the way it's working for you. That you're actually getting something out of this. The other thing too is I don't know how much longer with the United Nations now having the keys to the internet. Who knows? Maybe in a few months this might not be legal to do. You know, there's going to be some sort of hate speech law or copyright law under the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership or whatever. That's going to put all this stuff into kibosh at some point. But between now and then, I mean, I'm amazed that we made it as far as we have. I'll try to get as much info out there as possible. This is also, the restructuring of doing these is also kind of offset the demonetization a bit, which I think they've backed off a bit because too many people were probably complaining. So, and it was probably hitting their bottom line. So they're probably, okay, well, our algorithms can get this much, but it gets too much. How do we narrow it down more? So they're probably back to the drawing board. So, you know, live to fight another day. But in that time, this is what's going on. Yeah, so I'll just jump into it. So anyway, first one is the U.S. has pretty much suspended the bilateral meetings with Russia. They're no longer doing this. And the rhetoric that's coming out now is, again, don't be afraid to go over some of my older World War III videos, even stuff from a couple of years ago. Some of the stuff you're talking about back then you're seeing now. This stuff doesn't happen. It happens fast, but there's a lot of setup before. A lot of dots are put into place on the chessboard before it all connects, right? So it's like they put this here, this here, this here. In itself, it's nothing, but when they put this dot in, bang, they all connect, and away you go. So don't be afraid to go over some of the stuff, because some of the stuff I was talking about then, you're seeing now. So after that strike in Syria, that was really, I think that strike on, because it turns out it wasn't just Assad's guys that were hit from the U.S. airstrike, and it was definitely deliberate. You can't, you know, the U.S., they keep saying they've done it on that. Trust me, it was deliberate. There was just way too much coordination to call that you know, this wasn't one F-16 straying. This was an hour-long attack with coordination, reportedly with the rebels. They were ready to go into place. This was planned, definitely planned. And I think that's even more serious than the Russian jet that got shot down by the Turks. I think it's even more serious because of who got hit on the ground and the Russian response of them hitting the intelligence command center, killing U.S. guys, all that type of thing. So, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, you look at it now, it was a joke in comparison to what we're seeing today. Like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, nobody really died. Here we've got 60 people that have just been wiped, 60 to 200 people on two opposing sides, a NATO side, the Russian, Syrian, Iranian side, killed. You know what I mean? This is really, really, really something, and again, not a word on mainstream media at all. And just the idea that suspending the bilateral meetings with Russia, not on the mainstream media. You know, Kim Kardashian, whatever going on, that's more important. People do need to know this stuff. And it's not sensationalizing or fear-mongering to let people know what's going on. And I never say anything is imminent because we don't know. I mean, but I am more of the believer that an out-of-nowhere Kursk-style incident would happen that would push beyond a miscalculation, basically a black swan event. Something we just don't see coming. The pilot that shoots down, you know, the other pilot, or the warship that opened fires on another warship, you know, thinking that, okay, well, they hear some bangs, they don't realize it's just star shells going up, or whatever, they think they're being open fired on, you know, painted by radar, you know, the missile goes wrong, missile test goes wrong. There's just so many things that can go wrong with this. Pentagon spent, in the UK on a PR firm, $540 million to basically ISIS propaganda, war propaganda. So all the stuff that you're seeing, that high resolution, you know, Hollywood production terrorist stuff, a lot of that is coming. It's now openly admitted that's where it's coming from. Pakistan and India, well, Pakistan saying yes, we're going to reduce India to ashes if they attack. You know, so that's a lot of people so far. Strangely enough, the U.S. doesn't want to get in on that one. The U.S. government, they're like, oh no, we're going to sit that war out. But they love war. Like for a neocon like that, that's the neocon government. It's just really, really bizarre that they actually don't want to get a piece of that and take a side, because they could clearly take the side of Pakistan. No. But anyway, the tensions are there high. We'll have to keep an eye on that. There was a Russian embassy hit in Damascus, or just around Damascus in Jaha, if I said it right, by mortars. So the Russian embassy is getting mortared. Again, this rebels on the ground, so is it direct? Most likely, it's, probably has nothing to do with nothing. It's just the rebels are in the area and they'll shell whatever, and they don't like the Russians, so they're going to shell. But you wouldn't be surprised if they were told to do it by the Pentagon, and Mossad and all them, and the CIA, because that's who's backing them, and it's completely out in the open now. It's just not on mainstream media. I think they leaked this stuff slowly to dampen the blow, but anybody that knows that the United States is clearly arming the rebels, they just call them moderate. But even John Kerry has admitted we can't separate the non-radicals from the radicals. So we're just going to keep arming the non-radicals who's hanging around with the radicals. So then, are they not all radical? You know what I mean? There is no Free Syrian Army, and Al Nusra and all stuff. They're like, okay, well, you could strike Russia, you could strike these guys, but don't strike those guys. However, these guys are always hanging together, so don't strike them because you'll hit our guys. You know what I mean? Like, again, what do you think about that? You know what I mean? Like, it's openly admitted. The United States government funds terrorists. If you arm terrorists, you are a terrorist. The CIA is a terrorist organization. The State Department is a terrorist organization. The Pentagon is a terrorist organization. I'm not saying there's no legitimate jihadis. Yeah, the ISIS is made up full of willing participants on that 1,500-year crusade. I get that. There's no shadow of that. But these mercenaries would not be able to keep fighting if they weren't funded. These guys are poorer than dirt, okay? I myself, I'm a first world person. I live in a first world country, okay? And I can tell you, I'd be out of ammo, okay, in a day or two, and I would probably have to work for 3 months to be able to buy enough ammo to do it over again, to fight a day's worth of ammo. It would take me probably 3 months of saving up to do that. So how does a guy who's a farmer or a cave-dwelling guy or just living in a slum area in the middle of the Middle East, who has like no money, no wealth whatsoever, keep his AK-47 running, let alone $80,000 tow missiles and shoulder fire Iglas and stuff? How do they keep this stuff going, right? They can't. They're supplied. So war is a racket, right? And it's both sides doing it. I get it. The Russians, the Middle East is full of Russian weaponry. There's no way to say that, oh, well, it has nothing to do with Russia. But the new weaponry coming in with ISIS is American and German and French and British and Israeli weaponry coming in. Again, you follow this channel, you know that. And that's what the big deal is that these people are moderate. The weapons that have been lying around like these old T-55 tanks, they've been there since 1948. You know what I mean? Maybe not quite that long, but in Iraq they probably have been. Or 1955, I guess if it's a T-55. 1954, 1955, T-54, T-55, whatever. Those tanks have been sitting there that long. So this is just stuff that they're using. But again, to arm the thing, to fuel the thing, to maintain the thing, that takes a lot of money. That said, the Russians have sent an S-300 battery to the base in Tartus. Now, what a battery involves, how many vehicles? An S-300 missile system is typically, the meat and potatoes of it is three big trucks. One that carries 4 missiles, one that carries the radar and all that, and then there's another set of intermediate missiles. But it hooks up to probably about 18 other vehicles. Like an S-300, S-400, S-500 missile system, it could be up to 20 vehicles. So that's one battery. It's not just one vehicle. The Panzer S-2 is also part of. It's an integrated system. So one of those is going around the base of Tartus. It's the only naval base outside of Russia next to the Crimea, and I guess even though Venezuela and Cuba are Russian friendly, they don't control those ports. They're friendly too. Probably pretty soon you'll probably see a Russian port open up in Venezuela. We have radar stations that have opened up in Nicaragua, and over there in Cuba. Again, Obama dropped the sanctions not because he likes the Cuban people or that's 50-some odd years of sanctions didn't work. No, the Russians are moving in. They don't want Topol-Ms in Cuba, but if they're not already there, I'd be surprised. There's many rumors that the Venezuela and Nicaragua, they're getting T-72 tanks in Nicaragua. Not very many; it's only 50 tanks. But on that same, IL 96 coming in, could be an S-300 missile system, could be a Topol-M. They're probably already there. I would imagine they're already there. Argentina has become more China-Russia friendly. Still kind of, I don't know exactly everything that's going on there. But all of South America is probably easily, Bolivia, all those places are probably going to be opening up their borders to the Russians. Which, again, like I said a while back, if they destabilize the Ukraine too much, the thing you're going to see is Russia arm South America. We're slowly seeing it. We don't see it all in one day. You see it over, this week a ship comes. Next week there's a fighter jet. Next week there's a bomber. Next week there's a bunch of, like I say, T-72s. Or after that it's Topol-M and whatever. But yeah, the basics are too. So the Russians right now, I think they're looking at this. They have come to the conclusion that, the Russians cannot negotiate with the Americans. That the Americans want war, period. There's just nothing against that. That narrative. That's the only narrative. So they obviously know, with all the rhetoric coming out of the State Department, sitting there talking about how they're going to send Russians home in body bags, and they know that the statement is not about al-Nusra sending Russians home in body bags. They know that, well, if they don't back off, there's going to be all kinds of Russians killed all throughout Syria. Talking about no-fly zones, which there's some U.S. generals out there that are actually like, oh God, no, you're enforcing a no-fly zone is like, that means we have to shoot down Russian airplanes. That'll put us out of thermonuclear war right away. Like these guys get it. There's another general just came out. This guy, I'll get into him a little bit later on, but again, responding to the Russian rhetoric. But the Russian rhetoric is a response to the pushing on their borders. Again, I'm not saying the Russians aren't good in it. And again, this could be a ploy on all sides. Putin could be in bed with Obama. We don't know how dirty this game really is. All wars are rackets. Some people even say Hitler might have been a British agent just to get a war going, help to get a war going. You never know. That said, if they ask you to go to war, it's time to tell them to go hump their hat. You know what I mean? I know this sounds a little bit off, out of context and nothing to do with nothing, but there's basically 9 species of bees gone extinct in the United States. I don't know how many, or they have 9 species of bee, and I think 3 of them went extinct. So this could lead up to a food crisis. Right now, with the hurricane going on, Hurricane Matthew going on, just as a side note, look at the devastation that's going to do to Florida and up the Carolinas and up the coast. And they have a gas shortage right now. Could you have picked a worse time for the perfect disaster? You can't go anywhere because you don't have any fuel, and you get the idea. No bees. The bees die, we die. They pollinate something like 90% of our food. The rest is probably natural pollens, but that's a big hit to if that goes. And it's clearly to do with the chemicals of spraying and the chemtrails and stuff like that. And the again, this stuff is openly admitted. It's just do you really have to wait for the mainstream media to say, oh, it's true now? Because they're going to eventually, once they think they can get away with it perfectly. That type of thing. Sweden to join NATO. Latvia concerned as well. That deal, again, I don't think it's a fully done deal, but they're talking about it. And, of course, the Russians have said, you join NATO, we have a warhead just for you. That's kind of the way it goes, right? And the Swedes are arming an island, Bisgestland. I probably pronounced it wrong. But they're arming this island, and they haven't been this active on that island since 1999. And they're also, that island a long time. But they're also starting up a draft for boys and girls. They're going to readopt a draft kind of the way Norway did it. I guess that one, Norway, Switzerland, what they do is, I think, is 1 year mandatory service from the age 19 on, and you do 1 year in the army, that type of thing. But with Sweden, your gender equality is going to hit there, so boys and girls are going to have to go and fight and die on the front line. We always see this in the States. But in the States, it's a little harder because there's no such thing as boys and girls anymore in the States. Same problem we're getting up here in Canada. You say boy or girl, you might offend somebody, and that's hate speech, and that's words hurt too. Yes, maybe guys 18, 19, 20 years old in 1944 were storming the beaches of Normandy, almost facing certain death. But in 2016, the current year, 2016, because it's the current year, words hurt too. Just put that in perspective. and how and it hurts the Z's, not the boys and girls. They're called Z now or whatever. So but anyway, but yeah. So Sweden working up to do a draft. The IMF downgrades the U.S. economy again 8 times consecutive. What about this phenomenal recovery? And it's the IMF is the one that caused a lot of it's a Rothschild-owned, Rockefeller, Rothschild. These are the people that they know it's downgraded. They have to downgrade it because they're the ones that screwed it up in the first place. The NDAA propagandizing on the people when Obama signed that. It's basically what we're seeing now on the mainstream media. With the Russia's going to get you. Russia's in your underwear. Watch out! They're under your bed. They're in your underwear. They're in your socks. They're out to get you. The Red Scare, McCarthyism. It's like full blown McCarthyism, right? But it was General Petraeus that signed the NDAA propaganda. Like he also signed it with Obama. So you have to understand, a lot of these military generals like Petraeus, at first he kind of seemed like a good guy, but he's really not. He really does seem to be an asshole against his own country. The 40 million, I got that wrong in the last update. It wasn't 40,000, it was 40 million Russians. I think 12 million may have participated out of it between October 4th and the 7th. And this is basically a 3-stage drill that Russia is doing to basically prepare the Russian public for the big fallout. And they've got these fallout bunkers all over Russia, or subways or whatever that could be used, stuff like that. They've got that kind of stuff, coordinating people so they can make it to their, understand when they hear the air raid siren, what's going on, that type of thing. So they do this for the people every year, I know that. But this time it's 40 million. Usually it's like a few thousand, like 2,000, 3,000 people. So 40 million is a big step up. So obviously the Russians are signaling to the world, look, we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't concerned. That's why, again, this is I think the early stages of Putin starting to play the madman. Because he's going to start doing really radical things to get the world's attention. Because, like he said, I've begged and pleaded, the media won't put Putin, they'll criticize Putin up, down, left, right, center on the mainstream media, but they never, ever let you hear him speak. They never let you hear him speak. And, what they do with Trump, they do with Putin. I'm not a Putin fan. I don't think he's a good guy, but I think he's better than what we're up against. I mean, let the Russians deal with the Russians, that type of thing. If the people in Russia don't want Putin, that's up for them to deal with. But on this side of the aisle, one thing I will give Putin is that if we were going to go to war, he's had lots of opportunities to respond. But he does know that the sign is nigh. And he is, even if he's bullshitting, at least he comes out on mainstream media and says, we don't want to go to war. If you do this, he at least is being honest in that, even if he doesn't mean it. Maybe deep down he wants the depopulation too, and he's on the other side. But at least his citizens get a bit of a heads up. That's what I'm saying. There are no good guys in this. This is one thing people on my channel have to understand that. You can't say, well, I don't like this guy, so if this guy's the bad guy, then that guy's automatically the good guy. No, when you're caught between two cartels, or in this case several cartels, there are no good guys. And that's how you have to understand how dirty the game is. And there's stuff, again, I'm just a common guy that finds stuff on the internet after a few hours of research. The stuff that I'm not privy to, I can only imagine, what they know that we don't, right? But these 40 million, and there's also Yamata Mountain there. That thing is like something like 400 miles of underground tunnels. It's fully stocked for basically apocalyptic nuclear war. It's got fighter jets in there, tanks, obviously enough for thousands of people. It's like a underground Noah's Ark, so to speak. And obviously in the past couple of weeks, a lot of world elites are really stocking what they're calling for the new Adam and Eve. Like guys like Bill Gates talking about going to their bunkers as and we're going to come back up like the new Adam and Eve. So even they're saying it, like they're saying it. And hey, Goof, my dog. Even they're, like everybody is signaling that something is not necessarily about to happen, but we're on a dangerous path. I'd rather put it that way because we don't know. 122 millimeter Grad launchers supplied to, you guessed it, to the rebels. Just all of a sudden they got these Grad. Again, a Grad launcher truck. Sure, Russia built tons of them. But once you fire those rockets, it takes a couple of hours to reload those darn, well, maybe not a couple of hours, but it takes a long time to reload those rockets, hook up the little triggers on them and everything like that, and, you know, those Grad launchers. They used to call them Stalin's Orchestra in World War II, and then the Grad launcher is the upgraded version of the Katyusha rockets, basically, is what they are. Katyusha is for Kathy. So the Kathy rockets come in like a real bitch, you know what I mean? But anyway, the thing is that, again, where did these guys get the truck that fires these Grad 122 millimeter rockets? You know, to these things, each rocket is, you know, probably, because they're just ballistic rockets, they're probably a couple $100 a piece. But a battery of those things, you're looking at 20 or 24 to 30 rockets firing all off at once. And if they're thermobaric rockets, they're probably like $1,000 a piece. So how does a guy, even 3 or 4 guys that have haven't been working, they've been fighting, they're not working, they got no money coming in, how do these guys, you know, able to fight with that kind of equipment, right? And it does look like, yes, the U.S. supplied this, that type of thing. But again, look into it for yourself. You know, these things are, the problem with the Middle East is this stuff is just lying around all over the place too. But even at that, lying around, I mean, how much ammunition is expended in a day of war? You know what I mean? The stuff doesn't, it has to be resupplied. I don't think there's anybody in Syria shooting ammo older than a couple of months old. I don't think they're shooting off 1960s surplus ammo. I think that stuff has been more than burnt up. That type of thing. So again, this stuff is coming in. Where's it coming in from? Well, very openly admitted, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, etc., etc. And I think the Grad launcher came in through Turkey, but it wouldn't come through Turkey without the funding of the CIA, right? So, and then the Russians are in draft mode again. It comes around every year. Another 150,000 new recruits. Same thing. Everybody, boys, girls, Zs, whatever, they're all getting pulled in for a draft there. So even the Russians are doing it. China telling Japan, careful where you're going in the South China Sea because we will defend ourselves. So that Rodrigo Maduro, the Philippine, he was out to get, man, this guy. And the thing is, I don't think he's drunk when he's saying these things. That's the thing. I think he's bone sober. He I don't even know what he was saying because all there is, Mr. Obama, beep, 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 beep. And if you try to beep, 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 and we're going to beep, beep, beep. Like it just cursed him up and down. They're going to do regime changes in that. But the guy is, as Obama put it in the State Department, it's funny whenever anybody's asked about Mr. Rodrigo there, over there in the Philippines. Well, we know he's a colorful character. It's like, that's the best you can come up with. It's like, I remember Obama, it's like, just look on his face. Yeah, well, he's a colorful character. I don't really know why he said what he said, but it just goes on and on and on, and you got to laugh on it. But it's just like awkward. But yeah, no, this guy does look like he's going to be buying weapons from China. They're doing a drill with the United States right now, but I think this might be the last drill that the Philippines does. So the Philippines looks like they're going to switch to Russia and China. Strategically, that's a big thing. Not just for the obvious military thing, but the CIA with the drug running. The CIA, think about this. In the Philippines, I think 2,000 to 3,000 people have been killed under this guy's power. I wouldn't want to be living in the Philippines right now. I think this guy, he's authoritarian beyond belief. There's no doubt about that. But they're cracking down on the drug dealers, the drug users, everything. They're killing these people. But I think what they're doing is, and again, it's not like the United States can come out and admit this, they're probably killing the narco faction of the CIA, that type of thing. That's probably, again, he said, of course, all they talked about was the Holocaust, but he said, Hitler killed so many Jews, yada, yada, 3 million Jews. And they were more upset that he said that than, it was 6 million Jews, So anyway, but he was making the reference that Hitler did that, and people called him a monster because he was getting rid of whoever, that he thought it was the best. He goes, I'm getting rid of the drug dealers and the drug cartel. I mean, rule of law isn't working there. They can't arrest these people. They can only kill them. But that said, if you're killing the drug cartel, you're killing CIA agents. There's no doubt about that somewhere down the line. Maybe not very many. But the idea of the drug cartels and the war on drugs is, again, most of it is supplied by these alphabet agencies to fund their black projects, that type of thing. So if Maduro is getting rid of that cash cow, they're definitely going to try to overthrow him. There's no doubt about that. That said, the U.S. is also threatened to strike Assad's troops again. So last time was an accident, but this time we're going to do it on purpose. But Assad has already said, so have the Russians, and the Russians have already said too, if you attack Assad's troops, we will shoot down your airplanes. How much more of an escalation can that get to? This is probably why the Russians are doing the drill, because they know the U.S. is going to do it. That they're going to attack Russian troops. They're going to be if they're attacking Assad's troops. Again, the Russians are in there with them. These are the forward liaison guys. These are the intelligence guys. Helping to coordinate. I mean, they have to have a Russian guy there to coordinate with the guy in the bomber, and to also have a mediator there to coordinate with the, you're not going to hand a Syrian a CB and say, yeah, come in airstrike. They don't speak the same languages. You know what I mean? They speak. So you're going to have Russian intelligence on the ground during these airstrikes, or else, they won't know where to hit. That's the thing. They won't know where to hit. So obviously, if the U.S. is going to be striking Assad's troops, and again, why are they wasting any time fighting Assad's troops? The U.S. government, and again, there's a lot of U.S. people already on. They know. Like, I think more people are woke up than. It's just they haven't went into revolution mode yet. But I think that's coming. Historically speaking, yes, there will be a U.S. military coup in the States. I have no doubt about that. Will it be successful? Who knows? But, if you can't see it coming, you know what I mean? Like, again, I don't call for the violence. It's just, the recipe's there. We just have to turn on the stove, right? But the thing is that if they're talking about striking Assad's troops, they're going to hit Russian troops. And the Russians are only going to tolerate that so far. With the air defense systems in there, so why would Russia bring in, I think that's about 4 S-300 missile systems that they have sitting in Syria now. At least I know 1 or 2 in Iran for sure, maybe 3. They even have some in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis eventually are going to have to switch to the Russian and Chinese side if they want to live. That's the thing, because the Iranians, if the Iranians are backing the Houthis against Saudi Arabia, the Russians are backing the Iranians. So, again, the Russians are going to take over the Middle East, or the Middle East is going to be completely nothing but rubble. Now, that said, so to strike Assad's troops, there are generals out there that are kind of saying, well, hang on, a no-fly zone, like Dunsford there, he was out there saying, a no-fly zone means a conflict with Russia, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to go that route. So a no-fly zone is not a possibility unless they want to guarantee thermonuclear war against Russia and China. And when you go to war with Russia, you're going to go to war with China. Like NATO, Russia and China have a pact. They're going to defend each other. It doesn't matter who starts it. So I think there's a lot of U.S. generals that are kind of going, whoa, slow down. Not all of them. And I want to make a little point there. Somebody brought up that I thought was... remember I was mentioning the nukes that are reported to be going around Syria? And remember in 2010... in Dreyfus Air Force Base, when 6 nuclear B-61 bombs basically walked off the base, nobody knew where they were going or anything. One reportedly to have been detonated under the ocean 600 miles off the coast of Charleston, and the other 5 unaccounted for. Well, plus there was that Israeli sub, I think in 2009, that just went out of the harbor. Apparently it may have had nukes on it. It was a Dolphin-class sub. Nobody knows where these things are. They're gone. And the generals that were fired, those guys are nowhere to be seen either. So what happened to them? Some people say that these guys basically, guys like Steve Pachenik saying, no, those guys took the nukes and they got rid of them. But that said, they're out there somewhere. But somebody brought up an excellent point, and thank you so much. Why? Like I said in my last report, to nuke Syria. Okay, it doesn't make sense to nuke ISIS. It's pointless to drop a nuke on ISIS. It's completely. The nukes were designed to do things, but they weren't designed for that purpose. They were designed to level a city. If you want that city back, you don't nuke it. It's going to be irradiated for 25,000 years. So it doesn't make sense to waste a nuke on a bunch of jihadists. That's swatting flies with like a shovel. It's just pointless. It'll do the job, no doubt about it. But it still won't end ISIS. ISIS, you got to take them out with bullets, tanks, bombs, airstrikes, and get them in the pockets where they are. Dropping nukes at random will, you'll get some, I'm sure, but all these guys over here are unaffected, right? So that doesn't mean. So then it means that they have to make it look like either Syria attacked Israel, Turkey, or Saudi Arabia. That makes sense. Now, if they attack Iran, again, because you can't make the Syrians look like the victims, and you can't make the Iranians look like the victim, or the world won't be on board. I mean, they're already not on board with the Syrian war right now. Why are we there in the first place? Why are we arming the people we have to fight in the future? And the future is now. I mean, if you're there as a soldier in Iraq or a Canadian soldier in Iraq or in Syria, you're being shot at by guys that have been armed by your own government. That's when you quit. You say, no, fuck you. If you're going to, if you want us to get rid of the terrorists, we'll get rid of the terrorists. But if you're going to arm them while we're trying to get rid of them, that's a racket, It's incredibly criminal. But then this person brought up a really good point. If you nuke areas in Syria where the oil is, you can't use that oil. You can't get into the area. It's irradiated. Now, one nuke won't do it, but this clearly puts a plant right in the Golan Heights. The Israelis are slant drilling to get oil from the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. That's why the Israelis want it. Well, there's a couple of reasons why the Israelis want the Golan Heights. Number one, it's a defendable position. Number two, was a defendable position. I don't know about now with cruise missiles. They go right over the Golan Heights. But, yeah, they could use it to basically destroy the wealth in the area. That's a good point. Again, we'll have to keep them, that one's still a rumor. You never know. Maybe there's no nuke there at all. But with all the craziness we've been seeing, who knows, right? And that said, France, I know I'm kind of bouncing around, but France, getting back to the economy, Francois Hollande said he's not going to run for election unless employment picks up. France has now hit a 20-year high for unemployment, or it's the lowest it's been in 20 years. People are, again, they're ready for, basically, what you call it, the French Revolution 3.0. They're getting ready for that there. At some point, it's just going to snap, right? Again, people are just broke. They're whatever. That said, the U.S. Spent $1.42 trillion in 1 year. This is what Obama spent over the budget. Right now, there's no budget. Remember the fiscal cliff? Oh my God, the fiscal cliff. Obama's term. He's had one budget in 8 years. One budget. It took 4 years to pass the first budget. 4 years. And they're over that budget. So they have to, here in Canada, at least they pass a budget every year. At least okay, well, we got this much money, we can spend this much money. If they go over a bit, at least you know where you are. With the U.S., you don't know where you are. And it's worse than that. It gets worse than that because, and again, the amount of money we're talking, here's part two of WTF. The world is $152 trillion in debt. How? That much money doesn't exist on 10 planets, let alone one. 152 trillion in debt. How? And it's only a handful of banks. How can it be that far out of, it doesn't exist. And there's trillions of dollars, too, that are gone missing that probably fund these black projects that we don't know about, that type of thing. So, who knows? Here's the guy. General Mark Milley, Joint Chiefs of Staff, calls for war with Russia basically as a response to a Russian general saying that, basically, the U.S. is on its way down because it's, the war machine it's had. We're on our way up. Basically, we're ready to respond to them should we have to, whatever. So his response is, we're going to respond to you. But neither of these generals are asking, well, what are our world leaders doing to make sure that we don't have to go toe-to-toe? Again, these people are supposed to be smart, but obviously they're not. If they, oh no, well, we're ready for fight. Yeah, you got to be ready for the fight. Sure, there's no doubt. Nobody's going to doubt that. But you also have to look at it as, why are we in the situation we're in right now? Because of Syria. Why is the United States in Syria? What did Bashar al-Assad do to warrant a full invasion of Syria, pretty much? Maybe not a full invasion, but, exactly what argument do you make for the overthrow of Assad? Oh, he was a dictator. But the world, Africa, pick me an African country that doesn't have a dictator in it. You know what I mean? South America, pick me a South American country that really doesn't have a dictator in it. Cartels, dictators and communists. That's what most of the world is. So you're going to go after Assad, who basically in 2010, they armed protesters to arm the Free Syrian Army. This was John McCain and his buddies. Criminal. It's criminal. These are acts of war against another country. When that war, what did Syria do to the United States? The same thing Iraq did to the United States. Nothing. So, yeah. There's no reason to be going to war with these people. This could be an interesting number. The number 33 comes up here. But the United States, remember not that long ago, last year I was talking about the United States was number 6 in basically safety and security, was dropped to number 33 in safety and security. Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. Yeah, so the U.S. to bomb the Syrian Arab Army. Yeah. The U.S. is also spending another $15 billion to build a port on the Black Sea. Again, why does the U.S. have to build a naval port on the Black Sea? You know, like exactly. I think it's going to be on the Turkish side, but that, again, you're going to be building Turkey a port that they're going to kick you out of very shortly. So, yeah, Iraq is telling the Turks to get out of their territory, leave, or there are going to be consequences. So Iraq and Turkey can go to war too. I think you're going to see a lot of wars within wars. You already see it with the Kurds, where the Turks are fighting the Kurds at the same time they're fighting and arming ISIS. But they're not. The Turks aren't fighting ISIS. They're arming ISIS. That type of thing. And I guess I'll leave it at about this. To top it all off, if you're a U.S., and it's going to be the same up here in Canada anyway, and every military in the world. Now, I can imagine the Chinese and the Russians are looking at this and they're like there are confidence levels. If they do get into the fight, they're like, well, if we're going to be fighting those people, it's not going to be much of a fight. The U.S. has now put $8.4 million aside for sex changes for transgenders in the U.S. military. Yes, sorry, stop your cursing. I can hear it. Yeah. Okay, transgenders is a whole different thing. I think these people are mentally ill. They have gender dysphoria, and they're such a minute part of the population. Now, what you're telling me is that it's more important to have your sex change paid for in the military than the guy who came back from Iraq, Afghanistan, or wherever with PTSD, okay, and we're putting $8.4 million to somebody else who, and again, we're now taking, I think, at some point reality is going to have to strike. People like that, you can call it discrimination if you want, but these people they're not fit to be in the military. They're not fit to be in a lot of things if they have identity crisis. You need people that are mentally sound. And not only that, you have to take the bigger collective at bay here. When you have soldiers, if they're fighting beside a guy that's transgender, some might be okay with that. I think most won't be. They want to know this guy is top-notch in his mind, that type of thing, or girl, or whatever. So that, it's not the same as lesbians and gays. Lesbians and gays, they can just keep it to themselves. And even at that, these are 2 to 3% of the population. I think that's an overblown statistic, is your gays, bisexuals, your LGBTQs. And the amount of money we're throwing at these people is unbelievable. But a sex change is a personal choice, mentally ill or not. There's no reason why the taxpayer should be covering sex changes. I can understand if you were horribly burnt in a fire or something like that, and you need skin grafts or something like that. I'm okay with that. You had your leg blown off in combat. You know what? I want you to have that new bionic leg. I want you bigger, better, stronger, faster than what he was before. That type of thing. But the transgendered issue, that has to be put to rest pretty soon because, A, it's demoralizing the military where, yeah, there's people that are in there, they're not going to quit because some transgender joined up. But the recruitment levels right now are so low that they're talking about resorting to drafts. Now, when you go to a draft, I think that's what sparks a revolution in the country. People will not go to war for these bankers anymore. The people that are already in there, and there's guys that, there's people that sign up to be law enforcement, military, to serve and protect, and there's people that sign up to kill. I know that. I know there's guys that, they giggle every time they do a drone strike. But there's 1,600 people that quit as drone strike pilots, and several have committed suicide by doing drone strikes because it's just, once they've come to terms of what they've done, and and finding out that, really you're doing drone strikes in a country that you shouldn't be in the first place, that you're still in, even though after it's openly admitted that it's a lie, like Iraq. You know what I mean? Of course people are going to not want to be a part of that. So the U.S. military is just kind of swimming out. Now, mind you, this could be a strategy to take down the U.S. military from within, that type of thing. Just fill it full of women, transgenders, and whatever, and, pretty much crack down on emasculation. You won't have a military. Doesn't mean you won't have an army, it just means you won't have a military. So that could be, again, the people pushing these policies, you got to question their motives, and they can yell xenophobe, homophobe, transphobe, whatever. But there are legitimate questions to be asking here. Why is the U.S. military, at a time when the U.S. is in such shambles, let alone even the military is going going in shambles, that they're going to waste money on that. That is a personal choice. If somebody wants to turn themselves into something else, I think if they said we're going to spend $8.4 million to help transgenders get mental health therapy, because I truly do believe it is gender dysphoria, I think the doctors that have come forward, even though they've lost their jobs, they're not wrong. You're not going to trump the biological. Yes, I understand there's things in the brain, but they don't resort to saying, well, okay, well, you might have an identity crisis, but how about this? We'll give you testosterone if you're a man to kind of balance you out, to make you more man again, and help you adjust to what you are and make peace with that. And if you still want to be a transgender, fine, go ahead, knock yourself out. Go get the operation on your dime. But we're not doing that. We're doing that here in Canada. We've got kids dying of leukemia, and we're paying for transgender, who 41% usually end up trying to commit suicide anyway. So a transgendered military, that doesn't happen in Russia and China. Watch the Hell Marches. There's no diversification in that. That's a boot stomping army coming in. I'm not saying that they're that much better, but what I'm saying is you're degrading your military. And right now it's very clear that, again, if you've been watching Parliament here in Canada, everything is about gender this, gender that. But that's a part of Agenda 2030. That type of thing, the genderization of the military, or the genderless society, but really basically the feminizing and emasculating of the military. That's what they want to do. Universities, they're trying to, basically teach these, toxic masculinity. So you're referring to men as toxic, for being masculine. And again, the society will fall. If 5,000 Chinese and Russians and North Koreans were coming over the hilltops, I want the most arrogant, egotistical, narcissistic, bullyish, rowdy prick on that trigger who won't hesitate. I don't want him going, oh my God, they're coming. I want to hear him go, get some! Get some! That's what I want. That's who I want there. And if he's rude to a few women or rude to a few transgenders, fine. I don't care, because that's not what I need him for. I don't need him to be nice. I need that, when I let that dog off the leash, I need it to kill things. That's what I need. And that should be the priority of a military. Build things or kill things. That's it. A hurricane goes through, I want the guy that's going to run into the burning building, save the burning babies. You know what I mean? I want that guy, like a firefighter. I want that guy. Disaster relief, yes. I want the guy who's going to pull the people out of the water in the overturned ship. I want that guy who's, the Navy, the SEAL or the JTF2 guy that's going to go down on the deck, take out the drug cartels. I want that guy. I want the guy who's in the tank going up against 16 or 20 other tanks, blowing the shit balls out of them without hesitation. I want that guy. I don't want somebody who can't figure out which bathroom to use. You know what I mean? Like that. Call me an asshole if you want, but time and place. If you want to be a transgender, I think that's fine. That's up to you. That's personal choice. I'm libertarian enough. I'm saying, you don't need to bully these people or anything. I do believe these people need mental health. They've got identity crisis. But rather than treat their identity crisis, which again, 41% will, and this is tragic, will attempt to commit suicide even after the operation. That tells you it's a mental health issue. It's not a, I say, oh, it's because of bigots like you that don't accept these people. Again, such an overrepresentation, such a small part of the population, and overrepresenting them in an area where you need critically mentally sound people. That's a recipe for disaster. We're already seeing it. Again, males aren't signing up for the military anymore in the States. They're going to have to resort to a draft. Right now, women are going to be brought in on that draft. They don't have a choice anymore. I think between ages of something like 16 and mid-30s. But that number is going to go up to 64, if you're male or female. So you're going to have to go and fight and die on the front line whether you want to or not. Now, that said, would they ever, if it ever turns out like a Vietnam-style war where 58,000 people die, okay, and half of them are your daughters, I think, the populace would just flip out on that. You could say, well, that's not equality, if you're not giving these women a chance. No. No healthy society lets their women go and fight and die in a draft. I can understand, Russia did it in World War II, and some of the top snipers in the world are still females. I get that. But Russia, they were communist. They were like, everybody fights. There's no difference between the men and the women. You're all cannon fodder. I like to think we set the standard a little higher than that. I'm not saying that the women that don't want to volunteer can't volunteer. No, but there is dynamics between men and women that's, in some areas, you shouldn't have it. It's not a matter of, well, the men just need to accept it and that's it. No. Again, because the guys that will be coming over the other side of the hill, Again, if you watch how the Russians train, the Chinese train, I'm not saying they're all going to be super soldiers, but I'm saying the Chinese, they just don't have a fear of death when they come over the hill. We've already fought the Chinese. We know these guys will piss away their men like that. Now, if you've got a good strategy and a good bunker, you can have like the 28 Canadians, the 29 Canadians that sat there and fought off, 1,500 Chinese, in Compiègne. Back in the Korean War. Sure, stop the nuclear war from happening. 28 guys against because these guys, these guys, they did their job. They didn't waver. These guys, I'm sure they were terrified, but they knew if those bastards get by us, the whole planet could burn in a thermonuclear war at the time. The nuclear bombers were ready to go. These guys, they didn't have any other personal issues. They had one personal issue. How do I kill 1,500 more of those coming up the hill? That's what you want in your military. You don't want the airborne. When Khrushchev disbanded the airborne, they turned them into JTF-2, which is great, but JTF-2 is like a handful of guys. When we had a full airborne full of them that were, they were rough around the edges and they did some embarrassing things, with the hazing and stuff. Okay, crack down on a few individuals, fine. But you don't disband the whole airborne. Your top, every country around the world, when Khrushchev did that, they're like, those guys were badass. Those guys really kicked a lot of ass. These guys they were nut jobs. They were like, why would you get rid of your best soldiers? You know what I mean? It's just like, why would you do that? Again, if I'm prime minister, I'm like, I don't want a nice guy behind the trigger. I want a sensible guy. I want a smart guy. I want an army full of Rambos. I want a guy that's going to eat French Foreign Legion and shit out Green Berets. I want that guy there. Like that type of thing. I want a guy that's going to wipe his ass with an SAS. I want that guy there. I want the mean guy. I want the guy who's going to kill when I let him off the leash. But I also want the guy that's not going to hesitate under pressure. I'm not saying I'm that guy. I'm saying I want the standards high. And right now the standards are, what gender are you? What bathroom do you not know? Do you need help to choose a bathroom? That type of thing. Those should not be issues of the military. They should not be issues of the military. And a feminized military is a death nail to a country. At a time when we're saber-rattling with guys, with countries that are, again, the Chinese, they're training to, die trying to kill you. They're at all costs, right? That type of thing. So, in the foxhole, you might not have atheists in the foxhole, but you probably won't want Johnny Jane in the foxhole with you either, because you need to know that. I'm not saying that there's no transgenders that wouldn't serve well, but again, if they can, again, they have issues that they need to deal with, and maybe if they could take care of those issues, let them in the military. But I think that's one of those things that, I don't care what you call, even if you give me a thumbs down on the video, I don't mind that. You have to think about it from a strategic point of view. When people start shooting at each other, most super soldiers can't even handle that. That PTSD is a big issue because people can't take the horrors of war. You can only imagine how mentally destroyed some of the people are in Syria that are fighting. I watch their videos and stuff like that, and you do have men and women fighting there, like the Kurdish women and stuff like that too. And I'll just make a point on that. It's too bad that those women have to be put in a position to fight. They have no choice. We have a choice right now, and a couple of choices. Number one, avoid the war at all costs. Get the lunatics in Washington in jail. Get the Rothschild and Rockefeller, George Soros, Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski. Start with them, Clintons, Bushes, Obamas. Put those people in jail. They are all criminal. And, on the other side of the pond, get Blair and all those guys. And in Russia, they can get Putin and whoever nut jobs there. Let the Syrians deal with the Syrians. But the people there, once they're into that position where they have no choice but to fight or die, it's all is lost. But at that point, the only people that are going to make it through are going to be the ones that get lucky and don't get shot or flattened by a tank or blown up, or the people who are the most mentally sound and strategically minded. Those are the people that are going to be, those war dogs are going to make it through. Living with it, that's a different story, but you want to make sure they get it through. Now, that said, the way the Russians and the Chinese are, again, just look at their drills. If you're saying, oh yeah, but the United States is so much better, so much more advanced, they're not that much more advanced. The F-22 is not much better than an Su-35. The Abrams tank against the T-90, whoever gets the first shot gets the kill. That's my take on it. Anybody watching this video understands that the equipment on all sides is good enough. We're not much different than World War II, where the Germans and, the Messerschmitt wasn't that much better than the Spitfire and vice versa. Both had vines and vices, but it really came down to the man versus the machine. And I think we're back to that full circle again. Nobody has that much of a technological advance over the other guy. The Americans are not that much more advanced than the Russians. They're slightly more advanced in some areas, but not that much more. The training is almost as good as or better in Russia. In some areas, it's give and take. It's the same in China. The training is good. The amount of troops, the numbers, that's where the biggest problem is. Even if you have ragtag government or ragtag army, one thing you have to factor in is the Chinese have a 4 million man army. The Russians now have a 4 million man army, plus reservists beyond belief. Americans have a 1 million man army. Add in NATO, you got 2. So you're outnumbered by a lot. And again, the technology isn't that far off from each other. This is the time we live in. It's just, when I heard that, I was just like, oh my God, really? Really? And you would expect it too, because it seems like the people that are making the decisions are working against their own country. That's why, I think there's a lot of traitors at the top. And I'm a Canadian, I'm watching all this going on, and trust me, it's some of it is blind treason. I think some of these people, because they're following Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, and they don't really understand what it is. They'll just go along with anything. These are your yes politicians, but I think the rest of them are just complete, utter evil idiots. They do know what they're doing, and it's bringing, basically, it's a Trojan horse. So you're bringing down the country from within without firing a shot, which is a crafty game. It could be the Russians and Chinese behind it all along. You never know. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. Thank you so much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself. Be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Hey, hi and welcome. All right, new World War III update here. Yes, I know the lighting's bad. For a guy who does photography, and I know the lighting's bad, and I know I should have the camera on the other side, but for some reason I don't do that. I don't know. Is it that just being mean or something? I don't know. I'm hoping you guys are liking the new restructuring of how I'm doing the World War IIIs now. A little more frequently. Because I know some of you guys are doom porn junkies and stuff like that, but I hope it is informing you and stuff like that. So I hope it's working the way it's working for you. You're actually getting something out of this. The other thing too is I don't know how much longer with the United Nations now having the keys to the internet. Who knows? Maybe in a few months this might not be legal to do. There's going to be some sort of hate speech law or copyright law under the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership or whatever. That's going to put all this stuff into kibosh at some point. But between now and then, I'm amazed that we made it as far as we have. I'll try to get as much info out there as possible. This is also, the restructuring of doing these is also kind of offset the demonetization a bit, which I think they've backed off a bit because too many people were probably complaining. So, and it was probably hitting their bottom line. So they're probably, okay, well, our algorithms can get this much, but it gets too much. How do we narrow it down more? So they're probably back to the drawing board. So, live to fight another day. But in that time, this is what's going on. Yeah, so I'll just jump into it. So anyway, first one is the U.S. has pretty much suspended the bilateral meetings with Russia. They're no longer doing this. And the rhetoric that's coming out now is, again, don't be afraid to go over some of my older World War III videos, even stuff from a couple of years ago. Some of the stuff you're talking about back then you're seeing now. This stuff doesn't happen. It happens fast, but there's a lot of setup before. A lot of dots are put into place on the chessboard before it all connects, right? So it's like they put this here, this here, this here. In itself, it's nothing, but when they put this dot in, bang, they all connect, and away you go. So don't be afraid to go over some of the stuff. Some of the stuff I was talking about then, you're seeing now. So after that strike in Syria, that was really, I think that strike on, because it turns out it wasn't just Assad's guys that were hit from the U.S. airstrike, and it was definitely deliberate. You can't, the U.S., they keep saying they've done it on that. Trust me, it was deliberate. There was just way too much coordination to call that this wasn't one F-16 strain. This was an hour-long attack with coordination, reportedly with the rebels. They were ready to go into place. This was planned, definitely planned. And I think that's even more serious than the Russian jet that got shot down by the Turks. I think it's even more serious because of who got hit on the ground and the Russian response of them hitting the intelligence command center, killing U.S. guys, all that type of thing. So, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, you look at it now, it was a joke in comparison to what we're seeing today. Like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, nobody really died. Here we've got 60 people that have just been wiped, 60 to 200 people on two opposing sides, a NATO side, the Russian, Syrian, Iranian side, killed. You know what I mean? This is really, really, really something, and again, not a word on mainstream media at all. And just the idea that suspending the bilateral meetings with Russia, not on the mainstream media. Kim Kardashian, whatever going on, that's more important. People do need to know this stuff. And it's not sensationalizing or fear-mongering to let people know what's going on. And I never say anything is imminent because we don't know. But I am more of the believer that an out-of-nowhere Kursk-style incident would happen that would push beyond a miscalculation, basically a black swan event. Something we just don't see coming. The pilot that shoots down, the other pilot, or the warship that opened fires on another warship, thinking that, okay, well, they hear some bangs, they don't realize it's just star shells going up, or whatever, they think they're being open fired on, painted by radar, the missile goes wrong, missile test goes wrong. There's just so many things that can go wrong with this. Pentagon spent, in the UK on a PR firm, $540 million to basically ISIS propaganda, war propaganda. So all the stuff that you're seeing, that high resolution, Hollywood production terrorist stuff, a lot of that is coming, it's now openly admitted that's where it's coming from. Pakistan and India, well, Pakistan saying, yes, we're going to reduce India to ashes if they attack. So that's a lot of people, so far, strangely enough, the U.S. doesn't want to get in on that one, the U.S. government. They're like, oh, no, we're going to sit that war out. But they love war. Like, for a neocon, like that's the neocon government, it's just really, really bizarre that they actually don't want to get a piece of that and take a side, because they could clearly take the side of Pakistan. No. But anyway, the tensions are there, high. We'll have to keep an eye on that. There was a Russian embassy hit in Damascus, or just around Damascus in Jaha, if I said it right, by mortars. So the Russian embassy is getting mortared. Again, this rebels on the ground, so is it direct? Most likely, it's, probably has nothing to do with nothing. It's just the rebels are in the area and they'll shell whatever, and they don't like the Russians, so they're going to shell. But you wouldn't be surprised if they were told to do it by the Pentagon, and Mossad and all them, and the CIA, because that's who's backing them, and it's completely out in the open now. It's just not on mainstream media. I think they leaked this stuff slowly to dampen the blow, but anybody that knows that the United States is clearly arming the rebels, they just call them moderate. But even John Kerry has admitted, we can't separate the non-radicals from the radicals, so we're just going to keep arming the non-radicals who's hang around with the radicals. So then, are they not all radical? You know what I mean? There is no Free Syrian Army, and Al Nusra and all stuff. They're like, okay, well, you could strike Russia, you could strike these guys, but don't strike those guys. However, these guys are always hanging together, so don't strike them because you'll hit our guys. You know what I mean? Like, again, what do you think about that? You know what I mean? Like, it's openly admitted. The United States government funds terrorists. If you arm terrorists, you are a terrorist. The CIA is a terrorist organization. The State Department is a terrorist organization. The Pentagon is a terrorist organization. I'm not saying there's no legitimate jihadis. Yeah, the ISIS is made up full of willing participants on that 1,500-year crusade. I get that. There's no shout of that. But these mercenaries would not be able to keep fighting if they weren't funded. These guys are poorer than dirt. Okay? I myself, I'm a first world person. I live in a first world country. Okay? And I can tell you, I'd be out of ammo, okay, in a day or two, and I would probably have to work for 3 months to be able to buy enough ammo to do it over again, to fight a day's worth of ammo. It would take me probably 3 months of saving up to do that. So how does a guy who's a farmer or a cave-dwelling guy or just living in a slum area in the middle of the Middle East, who has like no money, no wealth whatsoever, keep his AK-47 running, let alone $80,000 tow missiles and shoulder fire Iglas and stuff? How do they keep this stuff going, right? They can't. They're supplied. So war is a racket, right? And it's both sides doing it. I get it. The Russians, the Middle East is full of Russian weapons.